RFK Jr. drops out of the presidential race and endorses Donald Trump. Could this be the biggest endorsement he's ever received? It's Verdict with Ted Cruz, and it starts right now. Welcome. It is Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you. Senator, this is one of those fun pods where we get to do video as well. And it is really fun to watch. Democrats had what they would have described as an amazing convention. They were coming out of it probably with a bump for Kamala. And then all of a sudden, RFK Jr. Monday becomes their worst nightmare.
Well, Bobby Kennedy now has dropped out of the presidential campaign, and he's endorsed Donald Trump. This is, in technical political terms, a big damn deal. Even more important is Kennedy's reasons why. He detailed just a stunning indictment of his former party. It is powerful, and it could easily move votes in swing states. We're going to break it all down in this show. We're also going to talk about Kamala Harris, as the border czar, has lost 300,000 children. Listen to that sentence again. Kamala Harris has lost 300,000 children. Now, the media won't tell you about it. We're going to.
Yeah, it's an important story, and it needs to be told for everybody. I want to tell you real quick about our friends over at Patriot Mobile. If you are sick and tired of giving your money to woke companies that are fighting against your values, one of those categories is your cell phone provider. Big Mobile is giving big donations to Democratic causes, candidates, and organizations. They're also supporting organizations that are actually paying for abortions. If you don't want your money going there, you need to make the switch to Patriot Mobile. Now, Patriot Mobile takes a portion of your bill every month at no extra cost to you. And they actually give about 5% of your bill every month back to causes that stand up for our First and our Second Amendment rights. They stand up for the rights of unborn babies, and they also support our military, our veterans, and our first responder and wounded warrior heroes. So if you're ready to take a stand and stand up for what you believe in, then work with a company that stands up for you every single day. Patriot Mobile also gives you amazing coverage because in 2024, every network, well, they're all using the same towers. That means you get exactly the same service you're used to. And they also have a coverage guarantee. Their 100% U.S.-based customer service team will help you find the best plan for your needs. You get to keep your same number you have now, keep your same phone you have now, or upgrade to a new one. So go right now to patriotmobile.com/verdict. That's patriotmobile.com/verdict, or 972-PATRIOT is their number. That's 972-PATRIOT. And I'm going to give you a free month of service when you use the offer code VERDICT. Join me. Switch to America's only Christian conservative mobile provider, Patriot Mobile. Go to patriotmobile.com/verdict or call them 972-PATRIOT for a free month of service today. Senator, I have seen a lot of endorsements that have happened, a lot of announcements that have happened in my political life. You've seen a lot too. A lot of them aren't as historic as people want to believe in the moment. I think watching a guy by the last name Kennedy not only drop out, but endorse Trump, this may be the most important endorsement that Donald Trump has ever received.
So, look, I think it has the potential to be seismic. We're going to break down the political impact of it. But before we talk about the politics, I want to focus on the substance, because the substantive indictment that Bobby Kennedy made of the Democrat Party is really significant. And I want to start by just listening to Kennedy's own reasons why he endorsed Donald Trump. Here, give a listen, give a watch.
I'm suspending my campaign activities. Not only did we do the impossible by collecting 1 million signatures, we changed the national political conversation forever. Chronic disease, free speech, government corruption, breaking our addiction to war have moved to the center of politics. I can say to all who have worked so hard the last year and a half, thank you for a job well done. 3 great causes drove me to enter this race in the first place, primarily. And these are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent. And now to throw my support to President Trump. The causes were free speech, war in Ukraine and the war on our children.
This is very authentic. You and I talked about this months ago. I had dinner with him in Nevada, and you and I talked about it afterwards. I was like, he's very focused on agenda items right now. They have not changed since I had dinner with him. No. He was very clear then, I'm in this race for these issues. This is why I'm running. And then, the Democratic Party screwed him over royally, and that's part of this story, obviously. But these are important things that many Americans agree with him on.
Look, that's exactly right. You've got one up on me. I've never met Kennedy, so I only know him from TV, from what he says publicly. But everything I see that is sincere, that is real. These are convictions that he has, and they happen to be convictions that are shared by an awful lot of Americans. You look at the first one he listed, free speech, and I think free speech is something incredibly powerful. It happens to be a deep passion of both you and me.
Yeah.
It is a major focus of this podcast. It's a major reason we do this podcast. Look, you and I are often recording verdict at midnight, at 1 in the morning, at 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
And heck, you do a morning radio show too, so you're getting slammed on both sides. But a big part of the reason we do it is between the corruption of the media and the censorship that is out there. That combination is enormously impactful. And one of the things that Kennedy said at the rally with Trump is he talked about throughout history, when you have governments censoring, bad things happen. And he asked the question, when have the people censoring ever been the good guys?
Yeah.
And it's a really, really good question. And I got to say, I think he is sincere. And there was a time when there were lots of Democrats who defended free speech. It's difficult to name a Democrat who defends free speech today. In the Senate, I served with 51 Democrat senators. There's not one, not a single one, who I've ever heard speak up against big tech censorship. There's not one who I've ever heard speak up against media censorship. Literally, we go through hearing after hearing.
The Twitter files. Was there anybody that was even outraged?
Zero.
So even when you guys were showing evidence and it was all the Twitter files were coming out, which is when Musk decided to buy Twitter, and we found out about all the censorship that was happening behind the scenes, many of us knew it was happening. We just didn't have the proof. Then we got the proof. We could see it. We could feel it. We could understand our reach was changing. People were being silenced. Their accounts were being shut down. And we had those things. But this was very clear in emails. No one was outraged. None of your colleagues.
Not even outraged. They don't ask questions about it. They simply want to memory hole the whole thing. So when Mark Zuckerberg testifies in front of the Senate, zero Democrats ask a question about censorship. When Jack Dorsey, when he was running Twitter, none of the Democrats. So you look at the Hunter Biden laptop, where you had Twitter, you had Facebook, you had big tech censoring it right before the 2020 election, trying to shut it down. You also had you had the corporate media shutting it down. There was not a single Democrat who asked a single member of big tech about it. They expressed no concern. And by the way, we now know the story was true, and that didn't matter. But so free speech is a really powerful, it is an issue that Democrats used to care about. I mean, go back to the 1960s, go back to the Vietnam War. And by the way, that touches on another issue. He talks about standing against war. Listen, it's worth remembering when Donald Trump was president, we had 0 wars.
Yeah.
We had peace and prosperity across the globe.
Through strength.
With Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we have 2 simultaneous wars. The biggest war in Europe since World War II, and the worst war in the Middle East in 50 years. And the Democrats, they are in the business, number one, of being so weak that it invites aggression. Weakness produces war because the bad guys are encouraged by it. But then number 2, they live for, what Kennedy would rightly call the military-industrial complex. By the way, that's a phrase that was initially popularized by Dwight D. Eisenhower, who knew something about the military, but also knew about the business of war. And the Democrats seem to like to get us in wars and stay in wars and spend money and money and money and money. And I do think Kennedy coming out and saying, hey, give peace a chance, that is significant. And I also think Kennedy's focus on the war on children, chronic diseases, and in particular, the corruption of big pharma, the corruption that gets in government. And listen, both parties bear some of the fault of this, but big pharma and the Democrat Party are in bed. And it is, you look at the FDA. The FDA, for example, to get a new drug approved, it typically costs billions of dollars, the trials you have to go through. And the consequence of that is really problematic because it means, for example, rare diseases. Rare diseases almost never get any money invested in cures for rare diseases. Why?
They can't make their money back.
Because they can't make their money back. If it costs billions of dollars to invent a drug, if you don't have enough patients to justify billions of dollars as a matter of cost, then what happens is Big Pharma doesn't do that. I was an original co-sponsor of right to try legislation, which Donald Trump signed. I also am the author of a bill called the Results Act, which says that if another major developed country has approved a pharmaceutical or a medical device, and so that's Europe, that's Canada, that's Japan, so it's not some banana republic, it's like real countries with real regulatory schemes. If they've approved a drug or a medical device that the FDA has 60 days to approve it here, and if they don't, it's automatically granted by operation of law. That would dramatically change how approvals happen here. Now, Big Pharma hates that.
Yeah.
But it is fundamentally wrong. Did you ever see the movie Dallas Buyers Club?
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Matthew McConaughey, unbelievable movie and true story. And the fact that he lost that much weight to play the character is still insane to me.
So, and as you know, I know Matthew McConaughey a little bit. I've spent some time with him. And I've talked to him about the movie. And the movie is actually a profoundly conservative movie.
Yeah.
It's a true story about a Texan who was going down to Mexico to get AIDS drugs. Why? Because they weren't legal here, and he was bringing them up here and selling them. And this was early in the AIDS crisis, and it is wrong. It is fundamentally wrong that our regulation should prevent you, particularly if you're facing a
at that point,
lethal
death.
disease.
It was very clear death was coming on your doorstep.
Yeah, you ought to have the right to try and seek technology. You shouldn't have to go to a foreign country. All three of those issues are powerful, and they all have constituencies that care about them. And Kennedy is a really powerful voice for all three of them.
You look at what he had to say, and there was that. There was also, I think, part of it was the corruption of the Democratic Party. And I want to play this clip and get your reaction because he just straight out called out what had happened to him. He had done this. And by the way, this isn't the first Democrat to be treated this way. Bernie Sanders was treated this way before. When they want to rig and fix an election, and especially in a primary, Democrats, they do it. They do it, and we're seeing it now with Kamala Harris. So we don't even need a primary, right?
Yep.
We're just going to decide who the person is, and you get to vote for the person we tell you get to vote for. Look at this.
Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing. No policies, no interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors and balloons in a highly produced Chicago circus. There in Chicago, a string of Democratic speakers mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? In contrast, at the RNC convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days.
I mean, that says a lot, and that's where I think some of his supporters were coming from. Like, we want ideas. We don't want a coronation. We don't want just whoever you hand over to us and you don't listen to us and we're just expected to vote for that person if it's Kamala Harris. And you see that happen, and I think it's important that he said it that way because I think that's going to bring some supporters with him to the Trump side.
I think that's right. There's a lot of substance in what he said there, and there are at least three different points that he's made. Number one, when it comes to democracy, Democrats don't believe in democracy. In fact, they despise democracy. They believe in power. Now, of course, that's why Democrats talk about democracy all day long. You look at Kamala Harris, who is now their nominee. There is literally not one human being on planet Earth who in 2024 voted for Kamala Harris to be the president. And yet she is the nominee without a single voter having voted for her to be the presidential nominee. That is stunning. Another thing he says is he refers to the media as the DNC's their media organs. Understand the level of corruption that we have, but that he's calling out, that the corporate media and the Democrat Party, they are one and the same. The media is an extension of the Democrat Party. And in fact, the media is the left wing of the Democrat Party. So to the extent they ever criticize Democrats, it's for not being liberal enough. It's to push them further and further and further left. They are the communication arm of the Democrat Party. And the media, the corporate media, no longer pretends to be journalists. They no longer have an aspiration to report the truth. They no longer have an intention to report on both sides. They are simply advocates and advocates for power. The media does not, the Washington Post's motto is democracy dies in darkness.
Yeah.
As you and I have joked about, that has become a mission statement. It is no longer a bad thing. When it was written, the idea was, we don't want democracy to die in darkness. Now the Washington Post says, our job is to keep it dark and kill democracy. Do not let anything critical of the Democrats come out. That is powerful. And then the third point he made there is the entire DNC convention had no substance.
None. And that's not hyperbole. Like, legitimately, there were people on the street, man on the street interviews afterwards, where there was conservatives out there asking people, what is your favorite Harris policy? To the delegates who were leaving every night, they couldn't find a single delegate to come out and actually say what her policies even were, much less what their favorite one was. And I love this because it's sad. The media should have done that. They obviously didn't.
Yeah. Well, and listen, I think Friday's pod, and if you didn't listen to Friday's pod, you ought to go back and listen to it because it was our analysis of Kamala Harris's speech. And we described it as vapid, radical, disconnected from reality, and dangerous as hell. And the vapid part of it, look, the first half of her speech was kind of nice, fuzzy biography. It turns out she likes her mom.
Yep.
It turns out that kittens are nice. It turns out that neighbors helping neighbors. Every word of that could frankly have been given by any candidate on planet Earth in either party.
Right.
Any Republican, any Democrat.
AKA no substance, kumbaya.
No substance at all. It's just I'm for nice fuzzy things. That's the first half of it. To the extent she got into any policy, she got into a few radical policies, like it turns out the Democrats are all abortion all the time, no limits whatsoever. That's what we stand for. Look, the disconnected from reality point that we made on Friday is really important. The entire Democrat convention was given as if Kamala Harris is the challenger.
Yeah.
With no acknowledgement that she is the sitting vice president. And by the way, down the hall is theoretically the president. Joe Biden may not know that, but he is at least... He's still the person who can push the button and annihilate the human race right now. Think how terrifying that is. He might think it's the rewind button on the remote control, but he is theoretically the commander-in-chief right now. And the entire speech, when she stands up and says, if you elect me, I will solve inflation. Well, okay, you're in office now. What the hell are you doing today?
Yeah.
If
your first day in office was almost 4 years ago.
If you elect me, I will secure the border. You've been the border czar for 4 years. What the hell have you been doing for 4 years? And if you intend to do it, why don't you do it now? And that's what Kennedy is saying, is that not a word of the convention was about actual policy that she intends to do. And instead, as he rightly said, it was all about Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad. That was the entire message, is we hate Trump. And the party as a whole, what they're really unified behind is power. They want to stay in power. And I want you to listen to this next segment from RFK, because it really does break down the utter corruption of the media and how the media and the DNC, they are one and the same. Give a listen.
President Biden mocked Vladimir Putin's 88% landslide in the Russian elections, observing that Putin and his party controlled the Russian press and that Putin prevented serious opponents from appearing on the ballot. But here in America, the DNC also prevented opponents from appearing on the ballot. And our television networks expose themselves as Democratic Party organs over the course of more than a year in a campaign where my poll numbers reached at times in the high 20s. The DNC-aligned mainstream media networks maintain a near perfect embargo on interviews with me.
That's shocking, but also I've witnessed this when I was a conservative at CNN. They would just say, "Don't ever allow that person back on the air.
Yeah.
Don't interview that person." We were told explicitly when I was there that if you went on the air and you discussed the laptop, you would basically be banished from the airwaves. This is very real. I've witnessed it on the inside.
And by the way, it's the corporate leadership. It's why I refer to them. I will never use the phrase mainstream media, because there is nothing remotely mainstream about the Marxists who are running these media companies. And the phrase I always use is corporate media, and usually corrupt corporate media, because what I didn't understand, and you've seen firsthand, it's the suits, it's the CEO, it's the head of the news division that make the decision. This is the position of NBC. This is the position of CNN. We are the Kamala Harris Angel Brigade, where we sing her hosannas. And look,
Joy. Let's go back to that word.
Joy.
Joy was the whole convention.
Yep.
And then remember when J.D. Vance, it was everyone started using the word weird all at the same time. And I want people to understand this is how coordinated these media organizations are.
It's not organic.
It's not like they hear it on ABC and
it
they're
is
like, oh, we should
literally
use it.
the morning message. Okay, everyone here today, we say Republicans are weird.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone here today, we say joy. And the hosts are just sort of puppets in this now. They all take orders. They all salute. But, you know, it is stunning. And Kennedy talked about, he said his numbers got to the high 20s. I don't think I saw them in the high 20s, but I can tell you for much of the past years, they were in the teens.
Yeah.
They were in the teens for a long time. That's a big chunk of votes. Why did the corporate media not want him on? It's real simple. Because it hurt Joe Biden.
Yeah, they want a coronation of Joe Biden.
It is. They wanted Biden to win, and anyone listening to Bobby Kennedy, and he would say something negative about Joe Biden, and that was not to be allowed. That's not the job of journalism. That is, it's interesting. You know, Kennedy invoked Putin. That is how Pravda works.
Yeah.
That is how in dictatorships the media works, is we will not allow dissent. And it ties right back into the First Amendment point. The media doesn't believe in the First Amendment. There's nobody in the media who's upset about censorship. I mean, think what an amazing statement that is.
There's an incredible story, Yeltsin, and I love going back and reading history. I was reading this a couple weeks ago, just as reminders. I go back, I'm like, hey, what was happening in other countries and comparing it to here. When Yeltsin had his final reelection, he was at one point about 2 or 3% favorability in Russia. And they were trying to figure out, the oligarchs in Russia, how do we keep this guy in office? Because if we go back to communism, we lose all of this money, all of this private sector we've been able to, to grab up when everything fell in the USSR. And so there was 2 oligarchs that controlled 99% of the media. They actually hated each other. And they got together and they agreed, we're going to prop up Yeltsin. And they just went out there every day. And they had 99% penetration of the homes in Russia.
Are those guys running CNN now?
That's the whole point. Yeah. But they literally took a guy, Yeltsin, that was at 2 to 3% rating with the people in Russia and got him to another victory so they could keep all that they had gained from this country. It's no different than what you're watching here. It's just a different
exactly
country.
What they've done to Kamala. And understand, the Democrats, they all know they are corrupt. They know this is about power. I want you to watch Gavin Newsom. We rarely show lefty pods, but this is Pod Save America.
And tell who's on this pod for people that don't know.
So this is the lefty pod of all the Obama bros. So this is the
senior
core
people with Obama.
You know, Obama's top speechwriter, his campaign manager. These are the people that were integral in Obama's campaigns and integral in his White House. They're on with Gavin Newsom, and give a look, give a listen to what they think about Kamala's coronation.
There's an intangible. It's different.
How are you feeling about the switch?
I mean, the switch. No, we went through a very open process, and a very inclusive process. It was bottom up. I don't know if you know that. Yes, that's what I've been told to say.
Yes, it was a blitz primary, I believe is what they called it.
It's a very, very fast blitz. Yes.
I think it was
a blink primary, so we call that.
Oh, a 30-minute convention. Between a tweet and another tweet.
It's amazing how it happened.
Yeah, it's been amazing. But what is amazing is how unified everybody is. I mean, it's next level.
They're mocking democracy. They're mocking your vote.
So, and I want to say something. So this is one of the pods that we do on video also. So every pod we do is on audio, and typically about a third of them are on video as well. If you haven't watched the video, this would be a good one to go to YouTube and watch, because seeing that image, look, the first thing that jumps off is those are 4 rich white boys. That is Miracle Whip. That is mayonnaise, rich, pasty white guys laughing.
The VP wouldn't like them because I'm sure some of them went to like Harvard or Yale.
Oh, no, but that's okay. If you're a Marxist, it's okay. Then you learn what you're supposed to learn at Harvard or Yale. It's only if you actually believe in liberty, if you believe in capitalism, then you're horrible. But listen, the utter hypocrisy. They are laughing about, we had a process.
They called the switch.
The switch, and they said, 30 minutes. We just decided, boom. And then you see as they're all laughing about how corrupt we are. We made the decision. She'll be the nominee. Voters, you shut up. There is no democracy in our party. And then you see Gavin Newsom, but we're all unified. Yes, comrade, we're all unified. And they all immediately, back to our talking points. Everyone's unified behind Kamala. That is our talking point. And they know it. It's not like they're unaware. They know that democracy is just a talking point that they trot out when they want to, but they don't actually believe in democracy. And in fact, they mock democracy. They laugh at democracy. And the Democrat Party, their central organizing principle is power, is staying in power. It is why, look, their single biggest policy vulnerability is the open borders that Kamala Harris, as border czar, has been in charge of for 4 years. I've had people ask me, well, why would the Democrats allow this horribly unpopular policy? You would think that they would just, like, for PR, not want to do that. And the reason is they see 11.5 million illegal immigrants, and they think these are Democrat voters. This is how we stay in power. And staying in power is what matters. Even if people have to die, even if migrants have to die, even if Americans have to be murdered, children can have to be assaulted, women have to be raped, all of that they're willing to do to stay in power. That cynicism is profound.
It is. And it's the party right now. Want to tell you about our friends over at Ammo Squared. If you are like me and you love to go out and shoot and protect your family and be able to defend yourself, and you believe in the Second Amendment, there is a company that is doing something that's really amazing. Ammo Squared ensures you have ammo when you need it. It's an automated approach to purchasing ammo on any budget. You pick your calibers, you set your budget, you select a shipping trigger, and that's it. Your ammo grows slowly over time and is stored for free as it builds up. It's shipped with a click of a button or automatically on a schedule, whatever you want to do. Now, unlike a traditional subscription service, you aren't forced into a set budget or a monthly shipment. You decide your budget. You can change it whenever you want to. You decide your schedule, and you can change it whenever you want to. Now, Ammo Squared also does something else that's cool. They offer nearly 70 different caliber options. Each shipment contains a carefully curated mix of factory new ammo from brands that you know and love. It's budget-friendly and customizable. You can buy as little as a few dollars a month and then use cost dollar averaging to your advantage. Now, let's say you change calibers. Not a problem. You can switch from one caliber to another. Let's say you save up a bunch of ammo and then prices skyrocket like they did during COVID. You can sell your ammo back for big profits. There's no minimum to buy, no membership needed, and no extra fees, no storage fees as well. Customers buy ammo on a small budget, and then you just watch it grow over time, just like a savings account. Sign up right now. I'm going to give you some free ammo in your account. Go to ammosquared.com/Ben, ammosquared.com/Ben. That's ammosquared.com/Ben today, and get free ammo in your account. So let's talk about the politics of this now. And you look at swing states, and this is my theory. You can tell me if you think I'm right or wrong. He was polling in most swing states, I'm referring to RFK Jr., anywhere between about 4% to 7%. If he's able to keep 40 to 50% of his supporters as they go over to Trump, that's a legitimate 2 to 3 percentage points in swing states.
Yeah.
That is the difference, Senator, between winning and losing in a general election cycle. This could be massive for Donald Trump.
This could have enormous impact, and we'll break the numbers down in a second, but you're right. But let me, before we get into the exact numbers, let's actually just talk about this in the macro level. Bobby Kennedy is the son of the late Bobby Kennedy, who would have been president had he not been assassinated on the presidential campaign trail.
Yes.
Bobby Kennedy is the nephew of JFK, who obviously was president and tragically was assassinated as president. There is no greater Democratic royalty than
the Kennedys.
Than the Kennedys and Bobby Kennedy Jr. in particular. That is for Bobby Kennedy to be endorsing the Republican candidate for president is massive. And do you know when the last time was that a Kennedy supported a Republican in a campaign? I'm going to go back in ancient history. I want you to listen to this interview with Richard Nixon. Let's go back to 1950. Give a listen as Nixon talks about it.
In 1950, he came into the outer office. My secretary buzzed and said, Congressman Kennedy is here. And so, of course, he came right in and he handed me an envelope. He said, I know you got a tough campaign against Helen Gahagan Douglas, and the family would like to contribute. So he handed it to me, and there was $1,000 in cash. Later on, I think it was quite embarrassing to him, and he wanted it made very clear that the contribution was from his father and not for him personally. But he was delivering it. There was no question that whose side he was on. And later on, after the election, when he was speaking at Harvard, he said that he was not unhappy about my defeating Helen Gahagan Douglas because he had not found her one that he liked to work with in the Congress of the United States.
Do you think that the money was, in fact, from him, or was it from his father?
It doesn't make any difference. The Kennedy money is all in one pot, and he had a chance to get it. I think, let me put it this way, unless he had wanted me to beat Helen Gahagan Douglas, that money would never have come, because I didn't know his father at that time. I'm sure what happened is that he told his father that, well, this is one of the coming lights here, and his father was anti-communist and felt, because of what I'd done in the Hiss case, which was already under the belt at that point, that he'd like to be on that side. No, I don't think he was an errand boy for his father. The money may have come from his father, but he wanted it done too. There was no question about that. He was on my side in that campaign.
I mean, that's a piece of history that I hope everyone, and like you said earlier, if you're not getting to watch this, if you're listening to the audio only of this one, go watch this on YouTube, because that's a really cool piece of history to see.
Yeah, the video is amazing. And it's Nixon describing how JFK supported him in Nixon's Senate race when he was running for the Senate in California in 1950 against Helen Gahagan Douglas, who was a very, very left-wing Democrat. And JFK showed up, number one, with $1,000 cash. And so JFK is this young congressman. He shows up with $1,000 cash. Now, that's illegal today. Actually,
yeah, you can't. The bagman like that, you can't bring cash.
So, and it was some of this came out of Watergate, and it came out of all of that. You had the initial campaign finance laws that you can't now accept that much money in cash. It has to be a check, or it has to be a credit card, or it has to be Bitcoin, but it can't be. You're not allowed. I actually had a campaign rally where a guy came up to me yesterday, you were there, with 5 $100 bills and said, here, I want to give you $500 for your campaign. And I had to tell him, I said, thank you, sir. I'm not allowed to accept that. Under the FEC rules, I'm not allowed to accept that much cash. You can give it as a check, you can give it as a credit card, but I can't take that. And I made him keep his money. Now, I don't know if he ended up giving or not, but it was an interesting
moment.
It is an interesting moment. And by the way, that was $1,000 in 1950.
How much is that today? I mean, to put it in perspective, it's a lot.
Well, I actually ran the numbers, and $1,000 in 1950 today is $13,051.45.
That's how much the Kennedys wanted him to win.
$13,000 that JFK delivered to support Nixon in his Senate race in 1950. And I don't know of another instance when a Kennedy has supported a Republican, certainly not in as high-profile a race as the presidential race. So Bobby Kennedy supporting Donald Trump, wow. Like, holy cow, it's been 74 years since this has happened.
When you look now at these swing states moving forward, and I think there's two takeaways that are going to be political knowledge. If I was doing a class, teaching a class in a couple of years, I would bring this up immediately. What did you learn from this endorsement? Number one, I think Americans are very much open to a cabinet that just isn't one-sided for one party or the other, and that you should look for ways to reach across the aisle because it can bridge the gap. And I think this is proof of this with the way that the reaction has been and how terrified Democrats are of this endorsement, number one. But number two, I also think it tells you how important it is to listen to maybe some of the smaller candidates who are running, whether it's listening to someone like a Buchanan or a Nader or even a Bernie Sanders. I think Democrats have done a bad job not incorporating some of that younger Phil the Burn into some of their later campaigns. Hillary Clinton really pissed off the Bernie Sanders people in a major way when she was running. And I think that's part of history that people haven't looked at so much is that, hey, you got to make sure that if you're a Democrat, even if there's someone you don't like, you might want to have a bigger conversation with them.
So yes and no. I actually think in many ways Bernie Sanders prevailed in that race. Why? Because his agenda became the Democrat Party agenda.
Yeah, but didn't she have disdain in it afterwards?
Look, Hillary did, and I assume does. And there's no doubt they treated Bernie and his coalition, they treated them like peasants. They gave them the back of the hand because the Democrat Party is all about power, power, power. But my point is Bernie's positions were fringe a decade ago.
Now they're mainstream.
That they are now the heart. Every one of Bernie's positions is what Kamala Harris supports. That they are one and the same. And when Trump became president, what it did is it radicalized the Democrat Party, and they ended up adopting Bernie's policies. But look, you want to understand how big a deal the RFK Jr. endorsement is? Just flip it. So the media is saying all day long, it's not a big deal, it's not a big deal, it doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. They're so desperate to convince you of that, that ought to tell you something. Just flip it and ask yourself, if Bobby Kennedy yesterday had endorsed Kamala Harris.
24/7 news coverage. I promise you CNN wouldn't have dumped out of it, which is what they did when they were covering him saying he was dropping out of the race. He started explaining why.
Repeat that.
Yeah,
literally during his speech, CNN cut it off. By the way, MSNBC aired the speech with no audio. They had their commentators talking over it. So you could see Bobby Kennedy was talking, but they thought it was more important to hear the lefties saying, the words coming out of Kennedy's mouth do not matter. Pay no attention. You cannot listen to this. They are terrified. And if Kennedy had endorsed Kamala, it would be 24/7. It would be the race is over. This is the final. This broke the back of Trump. Dance in the street, dance in the street. In fact, call off the election in November. We don't even need an election. Game over. Let's break some of the numbers down. So I have here Tony Fabrizio, who is Trump's pollster, put out a memo just breaking down what's the impact of the RFK Jr. endorsement. And if you go through the swing states, all right, I'm going to go through each of them, 7 states. So Arizona, RFK Jr.'s current share of the vote right now is 5%. The breakdown within Arizona of the Kennedy vote, how much of it supports Trump, how much of it supports Harris. In Arizona, it's 53% supports Trump, 28% supports Harris. That's a delta of 25%. That's a ton of votes if you assume the Trump-supporting Kennedy votes will now vote for Trump. That's a big chunk. How about Georgia? Georgia, Kennedy has 3%, and the delta is 47% for Trump, 34% for Harris. That's a delta of 13%, again favoring Trump. Michigan, Kennedy has 4% of the vote. The delta there is 43% for Trump, 41% for Harris. That's the closest, but even that's plus 2% for Trump. How about North Carolina? North Carolina, Kennedy has 3%, but the breakdown there, 58% for Trump, 22% for Harris. That's a delta of 36% for Trump. Nevada, Kennedy has 4%. The delta between the two, all right, this is going to be stunning. What do you think the delta is between the two?
I mean, it's got to be in the teens, I would assume, because of taxes.
It's much higher than that.
Really?
Trump, 66%. Harris, 16%. The delta is 50%.
Is that because of the tax issue there?
I don't know why it is. I'm just reading the numbers from Fabrizio's memo, so it doesn't say why. Let me do the last two swing states. Pennsylvania, Kennedy has 4% of the vote. Trump has, of that 4%, Trump has 49%, Harris has 35%. That's a delta of 13%. And finally, Wisconsin. Kennedy has 4% of the vote. Trump has 55% of that share. Harris has 25% of that share. That is a delta of plus 30%. What does all of that mean? It means the impact is very possibly 1 to 2 to 3 points in Trump's direction in each of those swing states. That is a big deal in an election that could easily be decided by 1 or 2 percentage points. This endorsement could very possibly change the outcome of the election. I think a week ago, after a month of relentless media propaganda, according to the public polling, Kamala Harris was winning in all the swing states but Georgia, which would suggest if the election had happened a week ago that Kamala would have won. If these numbers move 2 or 3% towards Trump, it could well be the difference that gives Trump the election in November.
I want to pull back the curtain a little bit. And in campaigns, when you're running for president, you have daily surrogate calls. And it's the campaign, usually senior staff, that runs them. And they kind of give out like some data or the talking points of what we're doing today, what the messaging is today.
And by the way, you've done that. So you were on the 2004 George W. Bush reelect. You were part of the media team. So you've actually been part of those calls.
Yes, and they're fun because some days they're just kind of like you check the box. Like not a lot's changed from the day before, but you do it and it's like, hey, we're still on this, or hey, there's a story or this data point, or make sure if you're on TV, you mention this. So I'm on the Trump ones now, and I can tell you just the feeling on the call, the excitement with this endorsement, with this big guest that they were having at the rally, and everybody knew what it was. Like it's not hard to figure it out. You knew it was going to be this. And it was different, and it was all about these swing states.
Yeah.
And I tell people this because, like, you do those calls every day, and they become the same in a sense. There are certain days where things are different, and this was one of those days where it just felt different.
Well, and listen, what Kennedy did this cycle was a big deal. Getting on the ballot all across the country, it is hard to get on the presidential ballot as an independent candidate. He said there are over 1 million signatures. Those are a bunch of people that were energized, that were inspired, that were excited. Now, not all of them are going to vote for Trump, but if a majority of them, if a significant majority do, that's a big deal, and it is why the corrupt corporate media desperately wants you not even to know about it and not to care.
I mentioned earlier a company named Patriot Mobile, and I can tell you right now, I've got my cell phone, and I have Patriot Mobile. Why did I switch? Because every time I make a phone call, every time I send a text, and every time I pay my bill, I know I'm making an impact for what I believe in. Because Patriot Mobile takes about 5% of my bill every month at no extra cost to me, and they give it back to organizations and causes that support the First and the Second Amendment rights of all of us. They also do incredible work protecting the lives of unborn children. And then there's another aspect. They stand with our first responders. They stand with our veterans. They stand with our wounded warriors. And they give back to projects that make a huge difference in their lives. Now, that's amazing on its own. But why did Patriot Mobile get started more than a decade ago? Because the liberals at Big Mobile were giving massive donations to Democratic causes, candidates, and organizations, including those that are providing for abortions right now. If you don't want your money going there, then take a bill you're going to have every month and have it be with a company that stands up for what you believe in. Check out Patriot Mobile, and I'm going to give you a free month of service. All you got to do is go to patriotmobile.com/verdict. That's patriotmobile.com/verdict, or call them 972-PATRIOT. That's 972-PATRIOT right now, and you're going to get a free month when you use the offer code VERDICT. Join me and switch to America's only Christian conservative mobile provider, Patriot Mobile. That's patriotmobile.com/verdict or 972-PATRIOT. You'll get a free month of service today, and switching is easy. You can do it over the phone. Senator, one last just point I got to bring up, and I think it's an important one. The Democratic convention was so worried about people not watching on the final night when Kamala was going to be speaking that they just started putting out lies and leaks. It made me laugh. Don Lemon, for example, said, I have sources that are saying that either Taylor Swift's going to show up or Beyonce or George W. Bush is going to speak at the Democratic convention. And then he says, stay tuned. Like clear propaganda. George Bush was not showing up to endorse Kamala Harris. No way in hell. But then they had this Beyonce thing out there or Taylor Swift out there. So the numbers would be massive watching the convention. And it was all a lie.
Well, look, Don Lemon used to pretend to be a real journalist.
That's true.
And he just happily was pushing out propaganda. I mean, the idea that George W. Bush was going to show up was always absurd and was laughable. But you're right. It was designed to get people to tune in. Whether it was Taylor Swift or Beyonce, they wanted to do something to draw up some excitement to get people to watch. But look, I got to say that night I was on Fox. I was on Jesse Waters. And I actually said, Jesse, I want to break some news. So I have an internal leak from within the White House that has come out. I know who the mystery guest is. It's El Chapo. El Chapo is going to address the convention, and the reason is simple. They were brainstorming. Who's benefited the most from Kamala Harris's policies? And as they talked about it, they could not come up with anyone who has benefited more than Mexican drug lords.
Yeah.
And so El Chapo, I'm told, and again, this is a leak from the Biden White House, that Kamala personally raised the bail money to bail. Yes, El Chapo's in jail, but she's very good at raising bail money for people in jail. So they bailed him out to fly him to Chicago to speak on stage and say, let me tell you, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? To all my drug-dealing compatriots, we are much better off, so si se puede. Turned out my prediction was wrong, but boy, it would have been appropriate because it sure is accurate who's benefited.
No doubt about it. Don't forget, we do this show Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Hit that subscribe or auto-download button. If you're watching this video on YouTube or on Facebook, make sure you share it as well. And if you're listening to audio only, make sure you go and watch. Some of the clips we played for you today are incredible. You should see them in person. Share it on social media. You guys taking the show and putting it out, especially, and I want to say thank you, during the week of the Democratic Convention, we had record downloads, and that is because of you guys sharing it. So we keep bringing this to you. We keep giving you the information, and when you share it, it has a huge impact on this country. And the Senator and I will see you back here in a couple of days.